This week's topic is continuing on with how to fix mistakes. And one of the things that can happen when you're knitting is that you can forget to put in a decrease. And with fixing any kind of mistake, it kind of depends on how noticeable it's going to be. If you can fix it and it's not too noticeable, or if you're using a yarn that's kind of hiding your stitches a bit, like a heathered yarn, or tweed, go ahead and fix it. But sometimes you may just have to undo it if fixing it isn't going to be enough. Now, let's say that I have forgot a decrease right here, and I wanted one row, and this is the row where I wanted it to be decreased. I wanted this thing to be right there, so I'm going to have to backtrack to that point. Now again, anytime you do this, part of the problem is that because I'm going to be decreasing my stitches, I'm going to have excess yarn there. So I want this one, this row right here, to look like that. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to ladder down. This is the row that I want to look like this one. And because my decrease is in this column, this is going to be the stitch that I'm going to decrease, and this is the other one. So I'm going to ladder down there. Now the first thing I want to make sure is that I'm going to have them going in the right direction. And this is an SSK decrease, and that means that the stitch on the right is going to be on top of the stitch on the left. And I'm going to want to position it properly. If this is the column where my decrease is coming out of, that's where I want to start. Now, there are a couple of ways to do this. I can position my stitches in this way so that I know that this one's going to be on top, and I can just use my needles to kind of manipulate this guy and pull it through. Now another way I can do that, let me get those stitches back here, is I can use a crochet hook. And frankly, I find it a little easier to just use my knitting needles. But if you do want to use a crochet hook, you put your crochet hook through here. Make sure that the stitch on the right, since I'm going to do an SSK, is on top of the stitch to the left. And I'm going to pull through. And here's the problem. You can see this great big long piece of yarn here. That's where I'm going to be making my decrease. What was 2 stitches is now 1 stitch. So I'm going to have some excess yarn in there. Now, what I can do, I'm actually going to ladder over to here because I want to do a knit 2 together on this side. And so I'm going to undo to get to that point. Look what I did here. I split that stitch. Going to fix that guy right now while I'm here. And again, whether you use a crochet hook or knitting needles to do this, it just kind of depends on what you like to do. And I'm working my way down here. And again, here's where, this is a knit 2 together, so it's a much better looking decrease. And here's where it's going to start. Now I want to get rid of that one. And there's where I actually did the decrease. These are the 2 stitches that I'm going to want to use for my decrease. Now, when I'm doing a knit 2 together, I want the stitch on the left to be on top of the stitch on the right. So I want to make sure that I'm positioning them in such a way that I can catch that. So I'm going to be going from this direction, and I don't want to twist them. If I were to get them on the needle wrong, that would be a twisted decrease, which I don't want. So I'm going to make sure that they're oriented properly as if I'm going to knit them. And I'm just going to pull that guy through. And again, I've got all this excess yarn. Well, that's just what happens when you do this. I am making 2 stitches out of 1. And now I'm ready to go. Now I'm going to knit this row, or purl it rather, to go back so we can see how these stitches look. And they are going to be a bit oversized. Now this is a very forgiving yarn that I'm using here, so it's not terribly noticeable. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and, fix one several rows below so that you can see what happens to the surrounding tension. The best time with any fix to fix it is on the row or after or a couple of rows after, because if you wait too long, then you get something that doesn't look great. Now notice that these do have a little bit of excess yarn there. Now let's go down here. I'm going to just slide down here, and let's say I forgot a decrease all the way down here. Let's say the decrease, do undo this guy, should have been made on this row. And I'm just going to go ahead and do an SSK, and I'm going to catch that guy. Okay, there's one stitch. And then I'm going to ladder up and catch these oops, but I got a split stitch. Always a potential problem. Ladder up. Okay. And again, where I did have 2 stitches, I now just have 1 stitch. And look what that does to the tension. Yes, my decrease is correct, but it just doesn't look that great. So, if you do forget a decrease, yes, you can go in and rescue it, but as with all mistakes, look at your work frequently so that you can catch them before you get to a position like this. Now, in a real project, what would I have done? I would have undone this to go back and get that decrease, because that just doesn't look great. You know, it's big and sloppy. You could try and manipulate all of that yarn to make it look good, but in the long run, it's just not going to look that great.